So one of the pieces that Dr. King was really frustrated by was something that he started to realize as the civil rights movement was moving on, was that he also was in a context, that the civil rights movement was in a context as well. And so as this is reported by Harry Belafonte, who was a confidant and friend of his, Dr. King was quoted as saying, I'm not sure, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not sure if I'm doing the best thing because integration for what? Or I feel like I'm integrating my people into a burning house. And so what he was saying was, I understand the struggle, I know what we're fighting against, but I'm not so sure this is such a great idea. And part of that was coming from the fact that the United States of America has had a long and tedious battle with its citizens, and what does it mean to be a citizen, and who can be a citizen, and what does that mean? And so when I think about that, I think about two things. One is a song by Prince called "Strange Relationship" off the Sign of the Times album. One of the I think is a great song, and he just talks about sometimes I can't see you happy, but I can't stand to see you sad. We're in this strange relationship, and then I think about this Disney movie that has just been blockbusters and people love it, and folks have shared these philosophies with their kids as a result of this movie, and it's the story of Beauty and the Beast. And Beauty and the Beast basically is a story of domestic violence. Yes, I said domestic violence. Now, some people say, well, you're just drawing too much out of this. But what I'd like to suggest is that the story of Beauty and the Beast is a story of a controlling individual who is doing his best to control another individual and uses violence and threats of violence as the method for controlling and ultimately trying to get some affection from this individual. And all too often, sometimes it feels as though our own country is relating to us in that way. And so, so that's just something to remember, something to think about. And when I think about the Duluth model of domestic violence and the power control wheel, that really starts to illuminate some of the things that our country has done, or the relationship that we've had with our country. And I have to say, I love the United States. There's no other place that I'd rather be than in the United States, which gives me the right to really have some conversations about what it means to be in the United States. And so when we look at the Duluth model, I would say that the Duluth model does a really good job of outlining for us in this power and control wheel what evil is. And I believe that evil is anything that tries to split the body and the spirit, thus crushing the human soul. And so when we talk about this, the Duluth model of domestic violence, or of looking at domestic violence, what we find is that this model lends itself very much to having this critical conversation about power and control, and how we relate to our government, and how our government and institutions work with and sometimes against the people. And so when we talk about this power and control wheel, what we understand is that there are that physical violence and verbal violence are methods of are the primary methods of control. And, typically in this power and control wheel, in terms of how it gets talked about in terms of domestic violence, that that the perpetrator of this violence, or the person who's trying to keep this power and control, typically uses coercion and threats to make that stuff happen. So do this or else. make sure that this is happening or something bad will happen to you. And all too often, when I listen to the political rhetoric, I sometimes hear those kinds of demands or statements made that if you don't submit this or do that, something bad will happen. Also, in this domestic violence and power wheel, using intimidation as a tool for continually keeping this pattern of violence going. Using emotional abuse, so manipulating people's feelings, manipulating what people think to your own end, not into the best interest of the individual, is problematic in this power and control wheel. Using isolation, I believe that the concept of race has been used this way as a tool of isolation to separate people from recognizing what is true and good about all of us. And so, if I can keep this group from interacting with that group, then they won't be able to consolidate and have some critical conversations about the kind of world that we want for all of us. Minimizing and denying and blaming, and all too often, minority groups in our society or groups that have historically not been a part of the mainstream conversation around equity and diversity get blamed for their state of being. All too often, and I'm in diversity trainings, and people ask me, well, if we're supposed to move forward, why is it that black people have they still have historically black colleges, or why is it that black people have black entertainment television? Why do they have their own channel? Why are they trying to be separatists? Well, one of the tricks of this power and control wheel is to make people believe or create the atmosphere where individuals get victimized for their method of adapting to the culture that they're in. What people fail to realize is that historically black colleges and institutions were set up because African American people primarily could not get into white institutions. And so they set their own institutions up. MTV was not playing the majority of black videos, and so the Johnsons decided that we will play our own, and so they set up Black Entertainment Television and Jet Magazine and all of these things were adaptations to the negative context for what it meant to be African American. And so I find it interesting that the system itself tries to minimize and deny and blame people for the position that they're in, when in fact it's the context that it really has driven their response to that. Also, in this power and control wheel, children get used as pawns. And then people use their privilege as, particularly when we talk about, intimate partner violence, males use their male privilege to say, I'm the man, or to get over or out of situations by playing the male card or talking with officers or other men, based on this man thing, and that becomes the driving force. And then the use of economics as an abusive measure to keep people subservient. And so those become some very critical pieces that allow us, that typically allow us to continue to be in abusive or demanding relationships. But I'd also like to suggest that the power and control wheel has, or the Duluth model for domestic violence has another part of it, and it talks about how we can have good relationships or positive relationships or nurturing relationships with individuals, particularly when we talk about partner violence. But I want to say largely as a society as a whole, we can have better relations. And one of the things that it says is, not using violence or the fear or the threat of violence as a primary method of interaction or controlling folks. And so when we get to a place where we can speak nonviolently to each other, then that becomes the slip road or the on-ramp to really having an equitable society. And so when people are feeling safe, as the equity model demonstrates, people are more apt to share and be with others. When there's financial and economic independence, where groups don't have to rely either on the government or on other institutions for their well-being and their upkeep, when everyone has the opportunity to get a decent job, then we have a society that's more equitable. When folks can negotiate around what's fair and not fair, when we can have conversations about the producers and the stockholders, the CEOs and the frontline workers, when we can have some conversations about how we can negotiate those things, that becomes a more equitable society. When we're responsible for everyone, when we see that the homeless person is connected to me, that they are my brother and sister, and that not only do I want to hand out to them, but I want to hand up to them. I want to raise them to my level. Then we start becoming responsible for each other. And when we start doing that, we notice that we can be honest and we can be accountable, that things become more transparent. And once they're more transparent, then we can also be more honest about what the problems are as well as what solutions are. And we have to start connecting with other people, understanding that we're not an island unto ourselves, that whatever happens to poor people, it's going to impact me as a middle class person, and what's happening to me as a middle class person is going to impact the wealthy folks. And so the poor and the rich are connected, and the middle class is connected. And we also start to offer trust and support as a society when we start to create the system of equity with the lack of violence as being a primary method of doing that. And when we're able to offer non-threatening behavior, when we offer safety, when there's economic independence, where there's negotiation and fairness, there's responsibility for all the folks in our society, when there's honesty and accountability, there's a connection and relationship with other people, we start to build that trust and support, and then that is where we get to a place that I think Dr. King was looking for us to get to, where his dream can be realized and our human dignity and honor can be built upon, can be expanded, and we can make sure that everyone gets those opportunities.